Hey guys, today we're comparing two different animes. You all know who this is, right? What about her? Or her? Or her? My point is, not a lot of people know Precure, and when they first see pictures or images of it, especially Smile Precure on Netflix, they assume it's some kind of shitty copy, when it isn't. So we're gonna talk about the differences between the two series, but also the similarities that are there. First, we'll be discussing the story. Without giving too much plot details, Sailor Moon's basically about girls who need to transform into sailor soldiers to fight evil. Admittedly, Precure is also about girls who need to transform to fight evil. But a very jarring difference is that the very first Precure season started off with a duo instead of 5. In this very first season, the main theme was opposites, with the main character being very sporty and the other being very academic. And fittingly, they're also called Cure Black and Cure White. Looking past the first season, I definitely see the similarity between Smile Precure and Sailor Moon, especially with the first episode of Miyuki being late and finding candy. It feels very much copied from the first episode / manga chapter of Sailor Moon. The 5 main characters have elemental powers. The Princess Kanda looks just like the Kaleidomoon scope, especially with the Pegasus motif and the fact that they fight clowns, Sailor Moon Super S inspired. Smile Precure, I feel, is also very unique in its own regards. Also, for those who are wondering, Glitter Force and Precure are the exact same series. Not talking about any censorship changes, just objectively speaking that Glitter Force and Precure are the same thing, just with a different name, and they just made some changes. And I recommend you to watch the original instead. As for the other Precure seasons, they really are their own storylines. Fresh Precure is about 3 girls who want to be professional dancers. Sweet Precure is about 2 girls who love music, just to name a few. Really, it's just the transformations that make people think Precure is a copy of Sailor Moon, but I think that's just a lack of knowledge about the magical girl genre. This genre has shows filled with transformation sequences, not just Sailor Moon by the way, but that doesn't make them a Sailor Moon ripoff. People only really have this bias because Sailor Moon was their first exposure to magical girl anime.
Sailor Moon, next Friday at 5:30.
And yes, obviously both series have different backstories with Sailor Moon and the Moon Kingdom and the Rainbow Garden and Precure, but those are a given for any 2 different series. I'm just comparing the story in terms of the plot of each episode. Another big story difference is that none of the Precure seasons are related. Each season brings a whole cast of new heroes, new villains, and just a whole new dimension of characters, so they're not connected at all. Except these two. These 2 are direct sequels. So if anything, this is more reminiscent to the Power Rangers series than it is to Sailor Moon. Because in Sailor Moon, all the 5 seasons have the same characters and are connected plot-wise. They just bring new characters. Now let's quickly talk about origin. Sailor Moon started out as a manga and then became an anime from there. Precure actually started out just as an anime. Mangas were created later, but they're based on the anime, not the other way around. And now, my favorite part, which is action. Something worth talking about since both are action magical girl series. Simply put, Sailor Moon is more of a magical fighter. You don't really see her punch or kick or slap very often. In the first few episodes you do, but she forgets about it later. She mostly uses her magical attack whenever the timing is right. With that being said, you don't necessarily need punching or kicking for an awesome fight. There's a lot of great Sailor Moon action scenes already, but a lot of them also leave a lot to be desired. On the other hand, Precure is much more physical. I really did not know this before getting into the series because from the outside it looks so colorful and fun, so I really didn't think all this action would be in it. And a small nitpick I have with the Sailor Moon series is that the Sailor Soldiers always never seem to be strong enough. They always seem to have to be bailed out by Tuxedo Mask, the outer Sailor Soldiers, or the Starlights. They just never seem to be strong enough, which is really annoying. I remember as a kid actually, whenever I would watch Sailor Moon, I would never pretend to be any of the inner soldiers. I would always either pretend to be the outer Sailor Soldiers or the monsters. In Precure, sometimes they have to be bailed out, but even when it is, it's by their other fellow teammates. It's not by an outside force. And for the most part, it's usually just them giving this long speech and then overcoming the enemy on their own, getting back up on their own feet to attack. But let's not make this all about why Precure is better than Sailor Moon. Now let's talk about stuff that Sailor Moon does better than Precure. As I mentioned earlier, the long speeches. There are some portions of Precure fights that are redundant, especially when they are giving some kind of motivational speech. Sometimes it can be really nice and emotional, but some seasons, especially Maho, Sky, Precure, this was their only tactic and their only gig. And with Sailor Moon, they just cut straight to the chase. Another thing I think Sailor Moon does better are the monsters of the week. They just seem so much more creative and funny and I just love the humanoid designs. As a kid, I remember buying the VHS tapes and being really curious as to what the monster would look like in the next episode. With Precure, they just seem the same. They just seem like the same giant monster, and this can lead to some very redundant fights, especially in Yes Precure 5 Go-Go. So yes, both shows have some good points and some bad points about their action. And now we're going to talk about the thing everybody loves, character development. Starting off with Sailor Moon, I think the 5 main Sailor soldiers are excellently developed, especially Sailor Moon and Sailor Mercury. Sailor Mercury actually has her own mini-movie, but the outer Sailor soldiers, they're really not developed as nicely as the 5 main characters. Uranus and Neptune, yeah, they get a lot of screen time, but Saturn and Pluto just get the short end of their sticks. They really don't get a lot of screen time, and they don't really get focused episodes very much. Sailor Pluto, she just appears along with Uranus and Neptune, being a third wheel literally, and Sailor Saturn especially is so ignored. She gets overshadowed by the new characters, the Sailor Starlight, which I think is super unfair. And disclaimer, Sailor Saturn is my favorite Sailor Scout of all time. I just stan underrated characters. In the manga, this was executed more nicely, with the Starlights acting as support characters rather than the main characters. It's super unfortunate that this didn't carry off in the anime. They just took center stage. Precure, on the other hand, doesn't really tend to encounter this overshadowing problem, because like I mentioned, there is a new cast of characters that are meant to replace the old ones after each new season. Even with the addition of new heroes within their seasons, such as Cure Beat or Cure Sunshine and Moonlight, I really don't think they take away too much time from the originally introduced characters. They really don't. They still get their time to shine. There are a few exceptions though, the worst case being Milky Rose and Cure Parfait. The season which Milky Rose was in, Yes Precure 5 Go-Go, was a sequel season, and it exactly suffers from the same thing that Sailor Moon did. Additionally, although repetitive, Precure's formula of including the group transformation every episode and having the characters say their battle names allows for no one to really get left out completely. They also take part in the group attacks. For our last point, we will talk about relevancy. Obviously, Sailor Moon is widely known across the globe. Casual anime fans, non-anime fans, they know what Sailor Moon is. Not a lot of people know what Precure is, except if you're in Japan, of course, and except those who know it as Glitter Force. Sailor Moon definitely has made more of a global impact, and you cannot deny that. But in terms of the anime world, Sailor Moon is kind of being forgotten, mostly due to the fact that it was in the 90s, and with Precure, it is a current anime. There's a new season every year, and currently they are airing Star Twinkle Precure. In 2014, they did try bringing Sailor Moon back in the form of Sailor Moon Crystal, but the reception wasn't too good. I also did not enjoy Sailor Moon Crystal very much. There is word of a 4th season, which is going to be a movie, but really, there is not much news about it, and it's just been forgotten. Ultimately, I must say I prefer Precure over Sailor Moon any day. The colors, the transformations, the character focus, but I still love Sailor Moon. Just a little bit less. Let me know in the comments which you think is better, and feel free to give me any video suggestions, Sailor Moon, Precure, whatever.